Fast am I. Good evening and welcome to Strateysh on a Ghaelg on Manx Radio, sé Dollin Mercer, Mish. In December 2017, the keepers of the Manx language launched a strategy to broaden its appeal, understanding and use. Speaking at the time, Culture Vannin's former Manx Language Development Officer, Adrian Kane.
The Bunscoil Ghaelg at the Department of Education, Mornjavega, Culture Vannin. Sit down, plan out where we think we might be in 5 years. What are the problems we're going to be facing and, how we go about dealing with them.
That 5-year strategy is now coming to an end, and Manx speakers and enthusiasts have been enjoying #Ghaelg21, a month-long celebration of the language. So what's changed? In the next half an hour, we'll hear from some members of Jeebin, the Manx Language Network, to find out what's been happening since the 2017 launch and what comes next in the life of the island's native tongue. But first, let's listen back to some of what Adrian had to say, speaking to Manx Radio's Bob Carswell.
Government's always keen on sort of joined-up thinking as much as anything, and I suppose, it's been in our thoughts, not just me, but a number of people, that it's a good idea to put together a strategy whereby those directly involved, which is, the Bunscoil Ghaelg at the Department of Education's Perry team, Mornjavega, and the work we do at Culture Vannin. Sit down, we look at where the key overlaps are, and we plan out where we think we might be in 5 years. What are the problems we're going to be facing, and how we go about dealing with them. So it's been sort of bubbling along for a while, really. But I suppose with Culture Vannin moving to a new place in St John's, that seemed an appropriate time, to really give some impetus to it.
So perhaps we could have a look at what's involved in it. And it's divided into several strands then.
Yeah, it's about a series of themes as much as anything, which seem to overlap all the work we do, which is sort of things such as lifelong learning, Manx for the speaking community, Manx as a part of our national identity, a lot of that's to do with PR, and making the resources appropriate and accessible, and ensuring that we don't, reinvent the wheel. And I suppose that's as much what this is about as anything, really. There's lots of things we could probably be working closer together on if we had time to sit down and think about them, and this is part of that rationale, really.
You mentioned the people who collaborated on producing this and developing this, but also, apart from those, there are, of course, other people who have a particular interest in the Manx language as well.
Oh, yeah, and, we did a sort of a forum one very rainy Saturday afternoon in St John's, which had a really good attendance with Manx speakers, and learners to see what they want, and we hope that organisation, Cheshire Ghaelg, Pobble, etc., had a chance to speak to their activists as well to see what sort of priorities they want. I'm just doing a sort of survey at the moment online with people on my email list, again, to sort of try and engage them, to come up with sort of ideas, specifically regards my budget at Culture Vannin, but to see what seemingly the priorities are for them. So, yeah, and people can keep, we're always open for ideas, we're always in need of ideas and volunteers as much as anything else.
Theme 1, appropriate and accessible resources. Stu insi cui to the head and the Asia.
Yeah, to Asia. I suppose it's about ensuring that, again, there's not overlap, that the resources we provide are appropriate, finding out what sort of resources we need. We're developing Learn Manx now as sort of a sort of hub, and we've redesigned learnmanx.com now, and I think it's much more accessible. It's probably easy to find things on, and so when you land on there, you can either look for materials for adults, Bunscoil Ghaelg, DOE stuff, Mornjavega. So hopefully doing that makes it far easier for people to find stuff as well. One thing I'm quite keen on is, developing a sort of coordinated approach to stuff we have, really, as well as raising the profile of our translation service, etc. So at the moment, what we're aiming to do is try and create a proper sort of audit. What's out there? What do we need as adult learners and speakers? What do the Bunscoil Ghaelg need? What do the Perry team need for, secondary school kids, etc.?
And I see this point here to develop a physical hub at Fairfield House, which will include a small lending library and a hangout area for speaking and learning. This goes back very much to the very early petition that Sheila Tarr presented on Tynwald Day, looking for this area to be just very much that hub for cultural activity.
And I think that's maybe what was presumed would happen to the school here, but that's turned into the Bunscoil Ghaelg. So as part of our role was to, I suppose, return to St John's in some shape or form. So developing this sense has been important. It'll take a while to develop, but over a period of time, we can develop a dynamic here with the Bunscoil. We just had Bunscoil kids in here this morning doing some additional work with me and one of our colleagues. And so more of that stuff, the better, really. And we'll try and promote the sort of lending library downstairs, hopefully get people to use it.
And in a way, that's quite an old-fashioned approach, whereas obviously you're looking to develop the digital side as well and have a digital hub for everything.
Yeah, well, you need them both, realistically. You do, language, you need to physically meet people and speak, don't you, ultimately? But there's a lot, remarkable amount of stuff online, really. So it's about doing the both, meeting people, having a good time with people. But you can do that online as well. There's a lot of resources online now. And we're sort of hopefully going to redevelop our Learn Manx app as well.
Theme number 2, which is Manx is an important part of national and cultural identity. Ghaelg mor aran scanshail je en as siúnach as culture oil.
I suppose it's partly about rebranding the language, not rebranding it, but ensuring that there is a modern feel to it. And also trying to get people to buy into and engage with the idea that the language provides a great deal for the Isle of Man, not just the Manx-speaking community about. And in some sense, that's more important than ever, really, that the language differentiates the Isle of Man from other jurisdictions. The revival has been really good for the Isle of Man. Cultural identity is important for the Isle of Man. Hopefully these things that politicians and others buy into, but I think the language can play a really important part in that, even if you don't speak it particularly, And so we almost, have been working with Lloyds and Douglas to develop a sort of a year-round cultural awareness programme. Hopefully we'll roll that out in future, and that involves some of the language, but other things as well. So it's about creating a sort of contemporary feel and a sense that the language is relevant to the 21st century, which I think is even more relevant than it ever has been, to be honest.
I was quite intrigued with that first one in the enabling actions, mainly because I'm not entirely sure what it means to create a simple advocacy toolkit for the Manx language.
Well, I think people can be supportive of the language, are indeed, but sometimes maybe find it difficult to articulate that importance, really. So it's all about putting together numbers. It's ensuring that people know the advantages of bilingual education. It's people are aware of the positive PR that we get from outside the island. So even just providing people with an overview, look, in the last, say, year, all these positive things in the media about the language, from stuff on BBC, Radio 4 to Channel 4 and stuff. So people aren't always aware of that, but you need to sort of almost a toolkit, I suppose, so people can say, look, when we're talking about the economic, social, political and cultural advantages and benefits of language, this is what it really means, really, rather than just say, I think it's really great. You need some substance to that.
Theme 3, Manx for the Manx-speaking community, Ghaelg son and Tir Ghaelgach.
Yeah. As much as anything this is about, and I suppose a lot of the stuff I do, I'm very keen on this, is, one, encourage more people to speak Manx, but then about, again, how do we go and support those people learning Manx, and also provide resources for those who are fluent or very good speakers. So, and we've got stuff such as, again, which I'm keen on, is working with parents, really, who are keen to use the language. So got some very good learners and speakers of Manx who are parents, and about trying to get them to use the language more with the kids. But also how we can support children trying to use the language more. So from both early ages to old people, how can we help people learn more and use the language more outside of a school context in particular?
And then the 4th theme, lifelong learning of Manx from early to later years. Insach fud bay was Llanawach gus Strateysh.
Yeah, well, again, that's a lot about providing resources which are appropriate for people of a wide variety of ages. It's about cultural awareness as well, and again, I mentioned that we're sort of trialling a year's programme with Lloyds at the moment. One specific thing which I think is really important is teacher recruitment, and ensuring that, if we don't have enough teachers of early ages through to adults, it's going to be very difficult to progress things, really. So in some sense, the whole strategy is about doing the boring stuff, really, about supporting the language over the next few years. What are the really things that we need to work on? They might be ensuring ex-Bunscoil kids have, access to the language, stuff outside school for them, that, adult learners have opportunities to use the language, that we have enough teachers and things like that. So we need to ensure people are able to learn the language from playgroup background up to adult education.
Having developed the strategy, then what's the next step for it? I mean, you're undertaking things like the audit, as you say, some of the boring stuff.
Yeah, we're doing the boring stuff like redevelop Learn Manx, redid the Bible site on that as well, redoing the Learn Manx app. So a lot of the boring stuff really, hopefully going to do an audit in the not too distant future. I'm just doing a survey. People now will do a survey about people's needs regards the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee. I'm hoping to try and get some more people enthused and maybe become teachers of Manx for adults and stuff like that. So and we're working with Lloyds to put together a sort of cultural awareness pack. So we've all been now tasked to go and do the boring stuff really. And none of this is going to happen overnight. It's going to take several years. It's 2017, 2021 with the idea that in 2021 we'll have a year of celebration of the Manx language. There's Blaine the Ghaelg in Ireland at the moment, so they're doing a year celebration. So we'd like to aim to work towards in 2021 a whole wide range of things happening throughout the year, really. So that's a sort of long-term goal.
That was the former Manx Language Development Officer at Culture Vannin, Adrian Kane, speaking to Manx Radio's Bob Carswell. The interview was first broadcast on Seacht Lair in January 2018. To find out what's been happening since then, I caught up with three people this week. Ruth Keggin-Gell is Adrian's successor as Manx Language Development Officer and is also a representative of Jeebin, the Manx Language Network. Another member, Jo Collister, is an advisory teacher for the Manx curriculum at the Department of Education, Sport and Culture. But first, Brisha Madrill is chair of Jeebin as well as being director of Culture Vannin.
Well, a lot's happened in the interim. The schools have gone from strength to strength, so there is provision, Jo will talk about it probably in a moment, through the Bunscoil Ghaelg, the Manx Medium Immersion School, and through the mainstream schools as well. And they have really just gone from strength to strength. There have been new resources, new ideas. There's been international recognition through Part 3 of the European Charter. And really, I think the greatest benefit of the strategy has been people thinking more about working together, thinking about how they can be more effective and efficient with the way that we're developing resources, so that we don't have three people translating the same book because they just all hit on the same idea at the same time. And so it's been a way that we can raise the profile of the language, that we can work together more effectively, and that's something that I think has been really exciting.
Obviously schools are a very big part of the process in fostering new Manx speakers and also in, like you say, in like the international awareness side. Tell us a bit about what's been happening in recent years to try and grow the language a bit.
Well, I think it's an ongoing process, really. So we're obviously very lucky to have Rob Tier and the Manx Language Unit. So they visit all the schools outside of Bunscoil Ghaelg, and I think Jonathan Ayres teaches his Manx language down there. And as Brisha said, the working together, I think that's one of the things that has changed the most, really. So if I use myself as an example, my CPD through the department was to learn the language. So I've learnt the language through my CPD. I teach a couple of afternoons at Bunscoil Ghaelg. I've done some cover for the Manx Language Unit. We recently had an inset over TT where all the teams got together. And I think everybody's so busy. So in teaching, I think sometimes there's this expectation that you'll do something brilliant and then you'll automatically share it with everybody, and you don't. You do something brilliant with the language and you move on to the next thing, and it's forgotten. So it's really important, like the inset that we did, where we actually sat down, took some time and shared ideas. So hopefully going forward, the sharing of the ideas will help for the development.
There's a very finite pool of teachers on the Isle of Man who are able and willing to be teaching Manx. So is there an element of like succession planning perhaps about looking to the future?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that, and I think COVID highlighted that when we became more isolated, I suppose, with our borders shut. And obviously there's been a lot of stuff in the news at the minute, especially in high schools, about getting teachers in. But yeah, the speciality of being able to teach and have the language, it is really important. And it's high up there, and one of the things we are talking about. And it's interesting too, because I'm a teacher and I speak Manx, and the very first time I went into the Bunscoil and stood in front of a class, I couldn't speak Manx because it's plurals, it's imperatives, it's instructions, it's the weirdest Manx you'll ever use. The lesson goes by, and afterwards somebody will say, well, what did you need help with? And you can't remember what you couldn't say. We need to think about that as our resourcing and almost put together a unique, bespoke, the Manx you need to use as a teacher when you're in there. So, and it's only by myself and other people working together and feeding back that we realise that those are the bits and pieces that are missing. I mean, obviously the staff that are there are great, they'll always help out. So yeah, part of the strategy is the recruitment, and going forward, it's always high up there.
Just while we're talking about the Bunscoil, there have been a few years now of children who've had their whole education at the Bunscoil and have sort of come out the other side, and are probably young adults now, I'd imagine. What have you seen in kind of what they've gone on to do? Are there any of the first children that are now being involved again as adults or in a professional capacity or anything like that?
Certainly, yeah. There's a lot of them who've come through the Bunscoil Ghaelg they're making their mark on the world. And one person who springs to mind, of course there are many, but one person who springs to mind is Isla Callister, because not only is she a wonderful musician and doing a lot of great things culturally, but she's a wonderful Manx speaker, and she contributes very much to the Manx speaking community. She does things like create different memes and things online and videos. She also contributes by writing articles in Manx for Nos magazine, and she's very willing to give her time in many respects, and she's actually contributed to Ghaelg 21 as well with an idea of hers. But there are lots of other, of course, fantastic students who've gone through the system as well, and it's just brilliant to see them flourishing.
In the interview between Adrian and Bob from the end of 2017, Aid spoke about some of the problems that might be facing the language in the next few years, and that part of the idea of the strategy really was to try and tackle some of those. What do you feel perhaps some of the problems were? Are they still here now, or what progress has there been really?
I think that's right. It's always about trying to think strategically rather than, for very necessary reasons, firefighting, because a lot of the language revival has had to be, we've got to deliver this now, and then the people have just done it. And you've got an incredibly talented teachers and other language professionals who are just able to do that. When you realise what goes into it, it's huge. I'm the daughter of 2 teachers. I know how hard teachers work. But when you see the teachers at Bunscoil Ghaelg in particular, they're having to create resources. So are the teachers in Rob Tia's team in the department. They can't just get resources off the shelf. They're having to create them themselves and then deliver it and think of how they're going to deliver the curriculum. So we shouldn't ever underestimate that and how wonderful they are. So the problems that we envisage were to do with teacher recruitment, which Joe has already talked about, but also about really how do we know what's been developed if everybody is just busy working on their own thing, that they won't necessarily say to the other team, I've developed this and actually this will work for you in mainstream schools, or I've developed this for A-level class and actually it'd be really good for adult learners. So one of the first things we did was an audit of the resources that exist within the schools and within the other organisations, and that gives you a good base level to say, this is what we've got, and then you can identify the gaps. So where do we go from there? So it was trying to think in those ways and trying to think about how you get the message out to people about the language, because if you're involved with the language and if you've been lucky enough to happen upon it for whatever reason, you know where to find out information. But how do other people find out about it? How do other people access lessons? And the one thing that we've always said is that Manx is for everybody, no matter where you're from, no matter what age you are, no matter what your background is. And that's been a really important message, I think, through the strategy, is to make sure that it feels like it's open and it belongs to everybody. And that's something I think was one of the greatest challenges to overcome. And we're getting there, but again, that's something in progress all the time.
Lots of these challenges and the kind of thought processes are shared in other places as well. Obviously, there'll be lots of parallels going on across the island of Ireland and in Wales as well. Has Jeebin and the Manx-speaking community drawn upon some of the experiences elsewhere, do you think, to plot how things might work here?
I think we do that constantly, and I was lucky enough to go away to Wales with some of the members in the department and the head of Bunscoil. And one of the reasons we went was to look at their bilingual schools and how they're working with their fully immersed Welsh language schools. And unfortunately, it was just before COVID, really. But it's one of the conversations that we've been having about how we could maybe utilise the skills of our Manx language speakers and teachers who go into schools, but along with staff who are already in schools. Like it'd be on we had a wish list when we had our Jeebin pop-in the other night. And on my wish list, I've lived here all my life, taught here all my life, and it would have been great if when I got my job somebody said to me, well, you're teaching on the Isle of Man, so because you're teaching on the Isle of Man, it would be great if you could learn a bit of Manx and teach the children a bit of Manx. Maybe finding that enthusiasm in a school, especially primary schools where there is a bit more freedom in the curriculum, and saying to those teachers, well, if you'd like to learn a bit of Manx and teach your children Manx, and then maybe pairing them up so geographically, and obviously having the Bunscoil as that main hub that other schools can go out to. I arranged the Manx Folk Awards with Chloe, the Manx music officer here at Culture Vannin, and we have a Lerna Ghaelg, a Manx day, and we're always trying to sort of tweak it and work out how best it would work. And we had a little idea not so long ago that we sometimes split the classes so that we've got children from the Bunscoil and we've got children who learn with the Manx Language Unit. But how great would it be if, because of all our online learning successes, that we could do something where children they pair up with a Bunscoil fully immersed language speaker. Yeah. And then instead of having the competitions where actually we've got the children who learn with the Manx Language Unit and the children at the Bunscoil, they could do something together. So there's so many opportunities and so much goodwill and enthusiasm. It's exciting, really.
So this strategy's kind of culminated really in Ghaelg 21, and there's been a range of different events. I think a couple have been mentioned already. What's the kind of next step about what happens next in Jeebin's work with the Manx language and other organisations too?
We're looking ahead to the next 5 years for the Manx language strategy. So you're right, the current strategy is coming to a close at the end of this year. Mm-hmm. And one of the events that we had within Ghaelg 21, within this month-long celebration of the Manx language, was a strategy evening where we encouraged members of the community to come and give their ideas in a pop-in evening. And so they could come and talk to representatives of Jeebin about the 4 different themes, which are appropriate and accessible resources, Manx for the Manx-speaking community, lifelong learning from early years to later years, and Manx as an important part of cultural and national identity. Mm-hmm. It's really important to draw on different people's opinions and ideas because they're part of the story and everyone has an important part to play. It takes a community, it takes an island and the greater, wider Manx-speaking world as well. Of course, we've got lots of people outside the island who speak Manx. It's important to bring that discussion out. So we were saying if anyone wants to email or write to us as well in their ideas, then they can feed into the next 5-year strategy as well. So that'll be from 2022, taking those 4 broad themes. Ghaelg 21 has been happening. It's still ongoing till the 9th of July. There's been a range of different events as part of that, 27 events, and different resources and things being launched too. And all of those different events have tied into the 4 different themes of the Manx language strategy too. So we've had things for complete beginners and people who are just curious about Manx, just want to dip their toe into it, and things for fluent speakers. Joe, for example, and the Cruinnicht committee ran a fantastic event and it kicked off the whole of Ghaelg 21 called E-Bingo, which was a Manx Gaelic family bingo night. And it was just wonderful to see people who are fluent speakers as well as people who are just coming to Manx for the first time together and just having a fantastic time in a very normal situation, doing something that was a fun social event. And that's what we want to see more of.
That was Brisha Madrill, Joe Collister and Ruth Kegan-Gell from Jeebin, the Manx Language Network, speaking to me this week as the Ghaelg 21 events continue. If you'd like to find out more, there's a wealth of information at learnmanx.com or on the Culture Vannin website. Further afield, Manx Gaelic's also represented on the Indigenous, Minority and Lesser Used Languages work sector of the British Irish Council, where the island can compare notes with Celtic cousins and other like-minded people from the neighbouring islands. Gurumai Moru, thank you for joining me, and Gaushu Karail. Take care.